Hey there guys, this is me, Malorian, and it's time for another question that comes from you, and this one here is going to be coming from Kirk Beck. Now Kirk Beck asks a whole bunch of questions around arc node, throws, blah blah blah, a lot of basic things, and I want to cover those kind of basic rules in separate videos, so I'm going to leave those for now. And the big one I want to be covering right now is his other one, which was on sportsmanship and the idea that this actually exists. And it absolutely does, and it's a big thing that we really need to cover. I mean, when you think about it, there's so much emphasis on the other parts of the game, on ways of how this is how you be building your list to be the most effective. This is the way you should be dealing with the death clock, like I think the last video of mine was. This is how you should be not making mistakes. This is the math. This is a blah 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 blah. But sportsmanship can be an easy one that gets ignored and yet is absolutely super critical. So I think the first thing we want to talk about is just, well, what is sportsmanship? And I think what sportsmanship is, I'm not going to pull out a dictionary or something like that because that's kind of like the whole point of this video, but we'll get to that, is that you are playing this game to be as a sport. And a sport is something that you're doing to compete, but also to enjoy. And it's that understanding that you and your opponent need to both lead that game enjoying the game that you just played. And again, it's one of these things where if you really focus like, well, sportsmanship's not going to really help me win a game, so what's really the point of it? I should be focusing on what helps me win games. Well, if War Machine is a game that you love and you want to keep playing, well, then you're going to start running into issues if you don't have any opponents. So, and that's something that's really hard to understand. I mean, I think as a younger player, I had the same thing. I just want to walk down to the store. Who showed up? Oh, you showed up? Boom. Okay, you lost. You know, especially like in some of my earlier fantasy days, and especially in my 40K days, you know, I just didn't have that understanding of sportsmanship. I was playing this game to win. I went down and I just wanted to crush people. That's all I wanted to do. And whatever type of loophole and bullshit I could pull from the rules, I was doing it to get that W. And I was watching my win ratio, and this was going to happen. But as time went by and as I started realizing like, oh, we haven't seen those players for a while. What happened? Oh, they left the game. Why did they leave oh, because they just didn't enjoy it. And now I think I want to be stressing here the idea of what people find enjoyable as well, because that's of course is going to be different for everybody, right? Some people enjoy a game where they can be ultra competitive. There's other people that just want to do cool things in the game. There's other people that just want to actually just play the game. They don't care what happens, win or lose. They just want to be able to sit there and enjoy the fact that they're getting away from their hectic life and they're doing something that's not bills or work, and they're just rolling dice and doing something different, right? So all these things might be what they be getting enjoyment from. And so I think that's another part as well. I mean, not only is it that first step to realize that this game's not only about you, but to have some empathy about others, but then to start be able to look out and be like, okay, what is this person trying to get from the game? And again, I always hear from these people saying like, you know, like, oh, my meta's dying, my meta's in trouble, these people aren't showing up anymore. And all I can ask is, well, have you looked into why? Have you seen why this is happening? Maybe it has nothing to do with sportsmanship. Maybe it has something to do with like, hey, they don't have time anymore. They just had kids. Maybe they can't afford it because, hey, they lost their job or whatever. There could be lots of reasons. However, for the most part, these people that used to play still have models, and the only thing that's stopping them from playing this game that they used to enjoy is to be convinced that they can still enjoy it. I mean, I can't stress that enough, that you need to be able to say like, okay, everybody, let's pump the brakes. Clearly everyone's a little bit off from this game right now. What are you looking for? What type of things? Like, should we start with a smaller type of style? So we try something different? So we say, okay, everybody has to be doing a different, whatever it is, you might need to be doing that to make sure your meta just doesn't die, to make sure people are enjoying it. Now that's an extreme. That's a super extreme, that it may be something that's just so toxic that now people don't even want to be playing. But even at a healthy spot, when you have a healthy meta that has lots of players, you still want to be thinking about that sportsmanship because of, one, you want to be keeping it healthy. You want to be having new players coming in, and you want to be retaining the players you already have. Plus, you just want to be making that game enjoyable. It's in your own benefit to be doing this. I think a good thing now is for me to try and explain some of these things that are really important and the way that you can be increasing your own sportsmanship so that you can be actually enjoying this game more and making sure they enjoy it more as well. And I think the very first step is that when you are going to be building your lists, you might actually want to be thinking about the fact about what the interaction level is with your opponent. And again, this is something that if you're a person who's just trying to win a tournament, this probably doesn't enter your mind at all. But there is a literal reason why I don't like playing Sloan anymore, because I'll go into a game, pew pew pew, you're all dead, or I take off whatever I can't, or oh look, I had to be too far back because of whatever your threat was and you won on scenario. Whatever way that game went, it just was not interactive. And the thing is that that leaves you at the end of the game where you might say good game and you might shake hands, but it really wasn't a good game. It was a thing where like you took your time setting up your models, they moved up, and then you just shot them off with Sloan. Like, well, there goes your caster, I win. How many points did I destroy? Okay, let's write this up and put in the results. And it's just, okay, great. Now I'm stuck here for 2 hours. I guess hopefully there's a bar or something so I can go check that out. But yeah, that definitely was an enjoyable game. And I've had people at events where they've had like 2 games like that in a row where they had 0 interaction, just lost the game, and they're like, yeah, screw this, I'm going home. This is not what I took off my Saturday for. And you got to avoid that. You really got to. So, sometimes what I'll do is I'll have one strong list, and then I'll make sure the other one's very interactive, that I can always play against a newer player or something like that. That's one of the things I always love about lists like my tons of pirates and tons of whatever that I'm using, is because even there, although there can be very competitive and very strong where I can gum you down and go for a scenario, the big thing about those lists is that it's so interactive. I'm giving you so many models that you can kill and destroy, and even if I end up winning on scenario on 3 or 4, or maybe you kill my caster, who knows how it goes, it is guaranteed to be interactive because I have so many models for you to interact with. So something to really think about there. So that's list building. The next time I think you'd really want to think about it is when you're actually starting the game and you're meeting your opponent. And you should probably just spend a second to think, what does this person want? I got people in the meta where I know walking into it, they want a super serious game, by the books. They want me starting my opening measurements with the precision sticks and just everything exact. And that's cool. I realize that's what they're looking for the game. I'm going to give them the cleanest game possible. I got other people who are like, look, they just want to be doing some janky stuff. They want to see me doing janky stuff. Let's go ahead and do this. And I'll do that. And then I got other people too where I can tell that they're in this to try and learn. And so I'll try and be more interactive with them verbally during the game, being, oh yeah, that was interesting, or after, just trying to figure out what they're trying to get for them game and trying to actually give it to them. And again, really hard because this is not helping you win games. This is, again, just that sportsmanship spot, right? Making sure that at the end of the game, you're both as satisfied as you can with that experience, and that if somebody honestly asks them, like, oh, did you enjoy the game? They're like, yeah, thumbs up. That was a great game. I went and I sacrifice time with my family and friends to spend it with these people that have the same type of plastic models like me, and I am happy that I made that decision. That's what you're trying to do. So the next thing I think, so we talked about before where you're making your list, we're talking about when you meet your opponent. I think the very next thing that you have to be thinking about is in those first early turns, because that first early turns can really set the pace for the rest of the game, right? If you're going to be in a situation where, okay, we're going to be calling out everything that the other person does. We're going to be slapping over for every single tough test. We're going to whatever, right? And these are really things where I think if you really think about it from an ultra competitive level, that you would be definitely want to be doing. But at the same time, the big thing is that at the early turns, it's typically not critical. I had talked about how using precision measurement sticks for your first movements, well, in general, whether if those are a millimeter off or not, no big deal. Who cares? Whereas in the later turns, whether you're a millimeter in or out could be a difference between that jack getting on your caster or not. So that's really critical. So I think it's really important that if you're really trying to be pushing for that sportsmanship spot, is in those early turns, don't stress over those small things. I talked about before about how like you should be getting good enough in your clock that you don't need to be slapping it to be handing it over for their things like tough tests, as long as they're not abusing it. And if you can make sure that those first, at least 2 turns, a lot of times the third turn as well, are just going nice and smooth, then it'll just be making for a more enjoyable game overall. And of course the things like if you go the other way, you're like, okay, you got to do a tough test slap. Did you measure that? I want to see that. I want to see that. I want to see your dice. If you start that type of thing and there's not a justified reason to do that, there's just this negativity in the air. It's like, oh, we're going to have one of those games. And so, again, it could be one of those things where if that very first spot you realize that's the type of player, that's what they want to have, then cool, but most players aren't like that. Now, when it comes to those later turns then, and when it's really coming down to, okay, now these things are important, it's now okay, of course, and I suppose it's always okay, but from a sportsmanship point of view, it's now okay to be trying to be bringing in a judge, being more precise, but what I like to do with that is make sure that it's very clear. It's like, hey, can we call in a judge? Like this movement or this measurement is extremely important. One of the good ones I had going on here is that we were going to a tournament. I was up against Sloan, and there was 4 hunters that could potentially be shooting my caster, and it was very close. And there could have been one way I could handle this. I could have been like, Judge, I want you to measure this right now. We're going to find out what's in here. I want to see what's going to threaten me. And my opponent would be like, really? Okay, sure. Let's have this come down. Let's go through this. But instead, I went the other way. I said, hey, this is just a very important measurement. Do you mind if I call the judge just to make sure that they're all cool with this? I'm like, yeah, sure, fine. Had the judge come over, and just the way that interaction goes over then is completely different. And the way that we walk away from that is not something where like, I was just trying to catch you with something, or I was trying to make sure that you weren't cheating me. It's just like, hey, this is a very important measurement. Let's find out about it. So that's what I'd be doing. And the same thing with like maybe stopping over toughs. They're like, you can be then more open. Like, look, I'm low on time, or you're taking a little bit long. I'm just going to be tapping over whenever you're doing your toughs, okay? And again, that goes over way better than suddenly them being like jarred for you slapping the clock and timing over to them for, whatever little thing that they're supposed to be doing. So keep that in mind whenever you're going to be doing those things that might throw off your opponent and you think, oh, there goes that. You always know when I'm getting past like the 10 minutes because that's when like turning off the furnace doesn't work anymore. I got to find some way around this. But anyway, I think the last part of sportsmanship is then just the end of the game. When you get to the end of the game, everything's done the way that you're going to be handling that. And that's whether you win or lose. If you get to the end of the game and you win and you're just like, yep, there we go. Well, that's the way I thought I was going to go. Right down the thing, let's go. That's not going to come over as a very gracious winner. Or if you're a person who's like, oh yeah, your big mistake is you did this. And I think there's something to be said there where you do want to talk, and there's some players that want to hear about how they won and how they lost, but at the same time, just like how you need to gauge at the start of the game about what those players are looking for, you need to gauge that at the end as well. There's some players that I know, win or lose at the end of the game, they're done with that game. They don't want to talk about it. If you bring up anything with it, they're like, okay, sure, you might as well talk about something that happened 10 years ago, right? But there's others who are really keenly interested. They want to have a conversation after to kind of do some analysis about what were the best plays, what could have been done better. And then there's other people who just want to bullshit after and be like, hey, so how are the kids? And it's again, that empathy and understanding what the other player wants at the end of the game will then put that nice cap on it, and then that's where people will be leaving that game after and being a lot more, satisfied with that game. So there you go. There is sportsmanship. It is a part of the game. It is super critical for keeping your meta healthy, for keeping your own interest and your own enjoyment level up as well. And, if all of us had a little bit more sportsmanship, it would just make it better for everybody. And I think the last thing I want to say is that there's some times where I feel like War Machine gets a bad rap that like, oh, those players, they're page 5, blah, blah, blah. The vast majority of players are good at sportsmanship. And I would say that's one of those things is like a curve, right? You have your general majority that are, fairly good sportsmanship players, and then you have your like golden top. They're like, oh wow, every single time you play them, it's an amazing game. And then those bottom ones are like, ugh, every time you play against them, it's not the best. And I think that the thing to think about that is, first of all, the fact that this exists. Self-analyze and say like, well, where do I fall on this curve? Do people usually, are they happy to face against me? When they hear that they're paired up against me, are they generally happy, or they're kind of like or are they kind of just like, okay, whatever? And then once you know where you fall on that, try and just get a little bit better, right? If you're one of those ones where you're like, wow, I might be one of the bad ones in our meta, let's try and move that up. Or maybe like, well, my sportsmanship is okay, but I can be spectacular. And the more that everybody moves up, the better for everyone. So there you go, folks. There's sportsmanship. If you have any counter thoughts or just any other stories around like that, I always like having that conversation down in the comments, so please do that. And otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.